Hey everybody, it's Everett with Ohio for Freedom. In this video, we are releasing the full conversation that I was able to have from the car with Debbie Leonhardt about a week ago. Now, Debbie Leonhardt is the forensic counselor that did not exonerate Pete from the Daystar scandal because Pete wouldn't cooperate, but she and I had about a half-hour conversation as she was willing to weigh in on the behavior that we showed to you in the video, Parsley Naked and Unashamed. Very appreciative with that. We played clips from that conversation in that video, but felt like it was only right to let you have the entire conversation. I will say that we've been able to tweak the audio, balance out the levels. It's actually really easy to listen to, and I want to encourage you. About 15 minutes in, I asked Debbie if the abuse and the trauma that Garrett experienced at the hands of exhibitionist Rod Parsley and many, many other things related to his experience, if that could have contributed to his heart failure at age 41 and a stroke at age 41. And her answer actually surprised me because it was resoundingly yes. It almost gives you you almost walk away thinking that it might not have just been contributive, but absolutely causative. And it makes me think real quick, and I want to get into the video, that it's just something you never thought of before. How many thousands of people are out there that have been traumatized and abused by faith and healing ministries? And how many people are out there suffering physically as a result of that? But there's a wave of healing. The Lord has had enough. He is cleaning things up. And you know what? I think, and hopefully, ministers and preachers are realizing that these young Bible students that are full of complete openness and fire for God, they're not there to honor any old guard. If that old guard has any validity, the old guard is there that maybe, peradventure, God would give them an opportunity to honor these young people and maybe have a positive influence. So there needs to be a real flip-flop, but at any rate, you're going to get a lot out of this exchange with Debbie Leonhardt. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.
Hello?
Well, Miss Debbie, how are you today?
I am doing well. How about you?
Busy as a little bee, but we are doing well. And is this still a good time for you, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will try, and I'm not good at this, but I'm really going to try not to keep you on the phone too long. But just, we're going to talk about the behavior that was, that Garrett described in the clip that you saw. But I just wanted to ask, your designation as a forensic psychologist, what does the forensic part mean?
A counselor.
Okay.
I'm a national certified forensic counselor.
Okay, I apologize. And what does the forensic part entail? Actually,
it's a way of doing an investigation, more or less, or an assessment of situation. And it really has to do with looking at everything from a holistic experience. For instance, if I were doing a forensic evaluation concerning like child custody,
yes,
I would want to talk to the child. I want to talk to their parents, their school teachers, coaches, if they have, like played on ball teams or something.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to look at it from a complete perspective to see what would be the best outcome for the client.
Okay. So
it's really a way of going about looking at a situation.
Gotcha. Don't know that I understand all, but I kind of see the difference. It's not just a matter of tell me how you feel about. That's very helpful. Well, Miss Debbie, I know that you can't, diagnose someone without having them willingly sit down and actively participate in an interview or whatever. But the kind of behaviors that Garrett was subjected to on the video that you've seen, what kind of behaviors are those?
My best prognosis or assessment of that would be that those are areas of personality disorder or a paraphilic disorder. And those designations are really from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Right.
Which is a bit more or less that looks at symptoms and sees if a pattern of behavior matches those symptoms.
Gotcha. All I know...
Certain criteria to look at
Yeah.
to see if someone might fall into one of those classifications.
And so what kind of classification would that... All I know is, to me, it's extremely bizarre and wicked. But, like, clinically, how would you classify that?
Clinically, I would classify that as what's called a cluster B personality disorder.
Okay.
And there are several personality disorders that land under that classification or category.
Right.
And among those are what we call a narcissistic personality disorder or a histrionic personality disorder.
Okay.
And both of those have certain characteristics that someone would have to demonstrate or show to be put into that classification.
Gotcha. And are those ever, like, blended, or is somebody, like, they're going to be this or they're going to be that, or do they ever overlap or blend, or how does that work?
Yes, they can. Sometimes it's possible to have more than one type or a mixed combination of those types, which would really land it in what we would call an other specified personality disorder.
Right.
Or an unspecified personality disorder. It could land in either of those.
Yeah. Well, this is maybe going to seem like a silly question because we're talking about personality disorders. But so let me frame my question this way if I can. When I hear about a grown man intentionally parading himself naked in front of an employee, trying to give directions to that employee, and then also parading himself naked in front of his adult-aged daughter, there's no way that I can deduce that there's anything normal about that. So if these behaviors actually happened, is there any other explanation other than a personality disorder?
Well, there are also some things that are called paraphilic.
Oh.
And those have to do really with more sexually based kinds of issues. But it is possible to have both a personality disorder and a paraphilic disorder.
And what is there a simple definition for paraphilic?
It's just a classification of all of the different types of sexual disorders. It includes things like an exhibitionist disorder,
right,
or voyeurism, which would be really watching someone else.
Yes.
It also includes things like sexual sadism or a pedophilic disorder, which of course has to do with children.
Right.
There are 7 or 8 different paraphilic disorders.
And so paraphilic can exist at the same time as the other cluster B disorders. Those things can coexist, or a person can be... Okay.
It is possible to have more than one diagnosis.
I gotcha. All right. I'm going to ask this question this way. If a grown man decides that he is going to buy a trench coat and cover his naked self and go to a public place and then flash expose himself to, let's say, passersby, is that sexual abuse on those passersby?
And that would land under the exhibitionist disorder category.
So was that I don't know if my phone broke up. So would that be considered a form of abuse against the people that it was, perpetrated on?
I don't think that you could necessarily call it abuse.
Okay.
But it is, however, a criminal act to do that.
Okay. Because here is my real question. Garrett was 25 years old, and he was under the employment of this gentleman, and this gentleman more than flashed him. It was, to me, there's this bizarre power dynamic of giving him instructions, ordering him what to do, and he really doesn't have the option within the scope of employment of just like bolting out of there. Is that abuse?
I think in those circumstances that it is definitely a form of sexual harassment.
Yes.
Because anytime you're you're under a person, like an employee of a person.
Yes, ma'am.
They do something that is inappropriate, sexual, then it would certainly land in the category of harassment.
Okay.
And be dealt with under the law in that category.
Okay. Then I'm going to move. This is a little more difficult or just unnerving. In his testimony, you have, in this case, Rod Parsley's 18-year-old daughter in the same room while he's parading himself around naked and actually taking a bath with her sitting 2 feet away on the toilet. Is that abuse to this 18-year-old daughter?
Because of the age, I don't think you could classify that as abuse. But what I would say is that being 18, technically she was an adult and could have walked away.
Yes.
However, you have to look at how the culture that she was raised in.
Yes.
This is something that happened in her family from the time that she was a young child.
Right.
And became aware of that, of sexual differences.
Yeah.
You certainly could say it was inappropriate, and she may have been acculturated in
Right.
that environment, so that 18, she wouldn't think anything about it,
Yep.
because for her that was normalized.
Right. So it's what am I trying to? Well, first of all, you would have to. What would Hillary Clinton used to say? Suspend your disbelief. I don't want to talk about Hillary. She wasn't sworn in yesterday, thank the Lord. But the point is that nobody in their right mind thinks that this behavior started when Ashton turned 18. Wouldn't this almost invariably be a behavior that started when she was a little girl?
I would suspect that it was. That the only way to know that for certain would be to interview or ask her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are across our nation, there are unfortunately, a lot of family cultures that accept this as normal behavior, although to the vast majority of us, it isn't.
Gotcha. And for those families that this is normal, is that like a generational or a multi-generational thing usually, or sometimes, or?
Yes. In most cases, it goes back many generations. And even part of that has to do with geographical differences, where people were raised, right, and how they were taught. But for most Americans, that would be considered strange behavior.
Well, for this American, it is. I got just a couple more questions, and I had shown you, I believe I texted you a picture of a couple of tombstones, and we had talked earlier. Ellen Parsley has on her tombstone her death date, or her birth year of 1935. But even though she passed away like 7 years ago now, there's no like death year on her tombstone, but there is on her husband's. Have you ever seen that before? And I'll just say, I think Rod Parsley can afford to have somebody etch in, 2018. I don't think money is the issue. If it is, then we'll take an offering for him so he can have that done. But have you seen that before?
Well, I have heard about it being done for a variety of reasons, but I haven't personally witnessed that. Okay. I will tell you, though, that some groups that I have talked with and worked with in the past, especially in West Virginia and Kentucky, that was sometimes, I've been told, that was done essentially so that the person remained present with them, even though they were deceased.
And this is something like this belief, or this is something that you've encountered working with groups or individuals from the Kentucky, West Virginia area.
Yes.
So we don't know if that's what's going on, but if that is what's going on, it wouldn't be the first time that you've ever heard of that.
Right.
You live a very interesting life, Miss Debbie. All right. I think I'm down to 2 or 3 questions. Garrett is come out of like a 15-year, I believe it's kind of compartmentalized, but God, I hate you, I'm mad at you, I don't believe in you. But his life has completely turned around. But a little over a year ago, at age 41, he encountered a stroke, and maybe that got the process started of him doing a reevaluation. But could the trauma that he went through these experiences that were on that video, could that possibly have contributed to him having a stroke at such a young age?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. It very much sounds to me, from hearing his testimony that you shared with me on tape,
yep,
he was truly traumatized by what happened. And as he was traumatized, that meant that his body began reacting to that. Oh. Because the body always tells us what is really going on.
Yeah.
And it experiences trauma, then it goes into very much the same kind of situation that soldiers who are at war experience. And that means that their immune systems and their hormonal systems may elevate.
Right.
And until that trauma is resolved, the body keeps acting in a mode to try to protect itself. And that can happen even long after soldiers come back from war, or when a person is sexually traumatized by abuse or other instances. The body remains on high alert.
Right.
And it will not calm down. And eventually, pumping all of that adrenaline and other hormones in the body can have an impact on overall health. And that certainly can result in stroke.
Oh my.
It can result in heart problems, digestive problems. It just wreaks havoc with the body as long as the trauma is present.
And even all those many years later, until it's resolved.
Yes.
Huh. Not exactly the testimony you'd expect from interacting with a faith and healing preacher. Miss Debbie, this I will let this be my last question.
Okay.
We're talking about the behavior that, as per this witness, Garrett has 1,000% credibility with me. I've spent a lot of time with him. He's a fine young fella, and he's doing good. He's got a beautiful wife and kids. He's doing great, okay? But we're talking about behavior that was extremely traumatic, that was, I'm going to say, perpetrated by a worldwide known evangelist and preacher. And if somebody is triggered by hearing this, I'm struggling to formulate this question, but I think it'll make sense if I say it this way. Maybe this could be just an example to somebody out there that has experienced something at the hands of a church or a minister, and part of them wants to say, I'm crazy. There's no way that this happened. Or what would you say to that person that maybe the lights are going on and they're saying, I'm not crazy after all. This really did happen to me. I didn't phrase that the best, but I hope it makes sense anyway.
Yes. I think, first of all, the person has to realize exactly that it did happen, and it was traumatic because it differed so radically from what was expected.
Right.
Morally and ethically or professionally or in any of those other areas, Garrett went in with a perception of what or who this person was. And because of the things that he experienced,
right,
it radically changed and traumatized him. And yet that can happen to many, many people. The spiritual stress
yes,
that you went through has happened to countless people from countless situations in churches and by proclaimed ministers.
Right.
And it changes sometimes the course of a person's life for many years.
Yes.
And unless they receive healing from that, it can change the course of the rest of their life.
Okay, and if a person is maybe even right now realizing that, okay, I've maybe been in denial, this did happen, I was hurt, I was traumatized, or whatever, I guess my question is, what should they do at this point to get them on the road to getting better and getting over this? What would be your advice?
Well, being a professional counselor,
yeah,
I would suggest that they see someone who understands trauma and then can assist that person through the steps of healing from trauma and recovering their sense of self, because what is most damaged is how they feel about themselves and what they believed or what they thought. And so they have to come back to a new understanding of who they are and what they believe. And that's regaining their identity. For the most part, from the short excerpt I saw of Garrett's testimony,
yep,
I really feel like he lost his sense of purpose and self in that.
yeah,
And it's important for him to reclaim his identity.
right,
And and know that this person was wrong.
Yeah. 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 Oh, I could say a lot about that. He briefly, for a brief moment, when he turned his life, said, Lord, I'm sorry, you know, that moment, he briefly considered going back to that very ministry. And somehow he ran across some loudmouths like myself and Robin Torgrimson of Mega Maniacs. And but Miss Debbie, I really appreciate it. And, you know, this isn't even stuff that we talked about 40 years ago when I first came into this. I didn't know anything about church hurt and abusive preachers or anything like that. That wasn't even talked about back then, was it?
No, not in my childhood and early adolescence, even early adulthood.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
That's right.
It simply was not discussed.
Right.
And it is so important now that we bring that out and that we do expose it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it is abuse. It is spiritual abuse.
Yes.
And abuse of power.
Yeah. Miss Debbie, I have taken almost exactly 29 minutes of your time, and I want to tell you how much I really appreciate it. And thank you for what you do. And I think you're gonna help a lot of people, and I think Garrett's testimony is going to help a lot of people. And keep some of you and your colleagues busy on the other side of this. All right. You call me anytime, and ma'am, I just want to say how much I appreciate it, and thank you.
I'm happy to help and assist anyone who's going through this type of experience.
Yeah. Well, you may have to make good on that, Miss Debbie. What's that now?
I said, please give Garrett my best.
I will do that. I absolutely will do that. Maybe you guys will get to talk sometime. Miss Debbie, I'm going to sign off. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. I'll be talking to you soon, I hope. And have a wonderful day. Stay warm. Okay. Talk to you later. Okay.